Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me once again, third time in a row, third time lucky. It is the one, the only, Alan Niven. Bonjour, Alain. Comment allez-vous?
Très bien, merci.
You see that? I made your name French there. Isn't that? That is just fantastic. That is fantastic.
I have to admit I have a little French blood in me, but that's a long story, and let's move on.
Let us move on. Last episode, and I wanted to just go over this with you. We were talking about Ron Keel and Spencer Proffer. Over the years, I've heard this rumor that Guns N' Roses' greatest song, or one of the greatest songs, Sweet Child of Mine, was initially conceived and or written by Spencer. Doesn't seem to appear on any credits anywhere. Is that just some wild, crazy rumor that the internet runs wild with, or is there any fact to that?
It is a wild and crazy rumor, but there is, as in most rumors, a very small germ of truth. And as I recollect, Axl pointed out to me at one point when I was telling him that I was unimpressed by Mr. Proffer as being the appropriate person to produce their record, that he did actually come up with an idea for Sweet Child, which was the where do we go, where do we go, where do we go section. But what I'm going to do is tell you that it was a complete steal, lyrically and melodically, from a song by a British blues rock band, and you can all go hunt for it.
Oh, really?
It was a steal.
Really? So I'm going to have to look that up, huh? All right, so next...
you go hunt for it.
Next episode, hopefully my hunting will be successful and I'll figure out where that line came from. But, all right. Wow, all right. So now I have something to do, so I don't have time for a long intro. So let us get right into this interview with Clutch frontman Neil Fallon. And here's the fun things, folks. This interview was originally set up and supposed to happen in 2016 at the Rock Carnival in New Jersey, Lakewood, New Jersey. Didn't happen. Then attempts were made to get us on the phone through 2017, 2018. Didn't happen. And then at Heavy Montreal in 2019, we were set to go, going to meet backstage. We're going to do it in face-to-face. Didn't happen. So this has been, I know what you're thinking. It's 2020. This interview has been 4 years in the making, but we finally got it done. This, Alan, by the way, is the Chinese democracy of interviews. It took 4 years, which, hey, we got it done. Anyway, here is Le Seul et Unique, the one and only, Neil Fallon. We are speaking with Clutch's Neil Fallon, recently released Monsters, Machines, and Mythological Beasts. As we say here in good old Montreal, bonjour, monsieur. Pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure's all mine.
It's actually been, for me and Clutch, the 4-year interview progress. We were scheduled to talk back in 2016. Something happened with the show, and then we were going to do it at Heavy Montreal. And then something happened there, but here we are. This is going to be great.
Excellent. Yes. Well, I know we'll come back to Montreal, sooner rather than later. It's a place we haven't played nearly enough.
Yeah, and it's a great town, great vibe for rock music. But let's quickly talk about what you did earlier today. You did the YouTube Coming At You Live, where you played some of your songs and you talked to the audience a bit. You uncomfortably said to people, please subscribe. In fact, let me start with that. At the end, when you say, hey, folks, if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, you sort of felt a little uncomfortable about that. Why was that sort of strange to ask for?
Well, to be quite honest, when it comes to like YouTube and streaming and that, we've for many years had a kind of get off my lawn attitude about it. We're, a very traditional rock band. We like to get up on stage and do it and then go to the next town and do it like that. And we've been doing it for 30 years. So it's a bit like, teaching an old dog a new trick. To me, I mean, maybe someone who grew up with this, who's younger than I am, has no problem saying something like, please subscribe. But talking to a laptop was uncomfortable just to begin with. So then kind of asking people to subscribe. It's just I guess it was, if anything else, it's just I hadn't done it before. And usually if you do it enough, you get used to it after a while.
Right. So let me talk about a little bit about this new medium in the sense of a lot of bands are, well, in fact, not a lot of bands, all bands are off the road, and we are having to do this Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And do you see that as something that's just stopgap, or are we seeing the industry slowly moving to more online performances where a band like an Aerosmith or a Kiss that might not have the physical stamina for a 200 show tour could just go to a soundstage, put on a show, sell it across the world to Australia, Japan, and just say, hey, here we are. Do you see ourselves moving into a model of less interaction?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, as far as like things like social distancing, I can't predict the future. However, I do know human beings are social animals, and it's not just about going to see your band live and loud. It's about being in the same room with your friends and, drinking beer or having a laugh, or, it's the whole experience that of going to see a live band of any genre. And there will always be a demand for that because people have been listening to live music for tens and if not hundreds of thousands of years. That'll never change. However, I think, just speaking for ourselves, I could say that once things get back to normal, and they will get back to normal eventually, we'll hit the road again. But I don't really see us stopping this kind of thing because yesterday was a bit of a revelation. I was honestly expecting a few dozen people because it was just a test. It was to test our audio. And when all was said and done, at one point, I think it peaked at like 6,000 people were watching the thing. And it was all over planet Earth, places that we've never played and most likely may never play, with people, from the Ukraine, commenting on it. And it was really, really gratifying to see that.
It is. And listen, as any band can tell you, you can't get to every market in the world. And so this might be a way to settle, get in there. Like I like bands from the UK like Status Quo and Thunder and stuff, and they never play North America. And listen, I would certainly pay $20 to watch a show. Also, Monsters, Machine, and Mythological Beast is a digital-only release. We talk about being old school and wanting to get on a stage and play a show, but how about physical product? Why sort of go only digital, not let a fan have something to hold on to?
We do. I mean, we do press records, and we will continue to press records, but rock and roll and heavy metal is its own little bubble that we live in, and we are very physically oriented, especially the older you are. You want to exchange your money for something that's tangible. And I always felt like buying a record was almost like buying stock in a band. Like you've invested yourself financially and emotionally into something that brings you joy. So the thing is, despite everyone's best efforts, physical sales are going down and down and down and down. And really, a record is more of a collector's piece at this point. It's not the way people listen to music, whether you like it or not. And I think we also run in the same circles where we bump shoulders with a lot of audiophiles. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people, and I think the majority of people don't care how they get their music, whether it be on their phone or their desktop or streaming through their smart TV. And we just have to adapt. Since we own our own record label, this is the record label side of me saying, okay, we need to figure out how to get through these other channels because record stores are very few and far between, as you know.
They are, and they're going to be disappearing as we move forward. Talk to me a little also about the Weathermaker Vault series, where you've been putting out songs. I don't want to say drips and drabs because that almost sounds nasty, but you've been going slow. Instead of putting a full collection, these singles come out one at a time. Talk to me a little about that thinking, and why not just say, all right, we're going to sit around until we get 10 songs and then we'll put them out?
For two reasons. Well, one, we know there's a period of time between the last record and the new record, and nowadays it's very important to keep people's attention. And this was the first time we thought about releasing something just digitally, and we wanted to kind of have a protected play instead of saying, okay, here's our new album of 10 songs and it's just digital, and have the fans just melt down in fury because they want an album. We wanted to experiment and see what it was like to just put out a digital single, and we'll probably compile those onto a vinyl record eventually. But one other thing that's changing too is the whole notion of the touring cycle. I mean, it used to be a band would, record a record, and then the record label would set it up for 3 months, and then the band would tour anywhere from 2 to 5 years on it. And then when that was exhausted, they would make another record. That's done. That's over. For us, it's just kind of habitual.
Right. What else might be over and I've been talking about this with other artists, is with the COVID and the shows, a lot of the middle ground is going to be lost in terms of the smaller clubs may not survive. Your Madison Square Gardens will probably still be there. Do you think moving forward that we're going to lose a lot of the sort of farm clubs, type venues where you get to develop your craft? And if so, how do we replace that?
I hate to say it, but I think we will lose them, but I also think they will come back. Maybe not the same venue with the same name, but I genuinely think people want this, like they want to watch or be. I think sometimes the word entertainment is thought of as a cheap word, but I don't think it's cheap at all. I think it's humans entertaining each other as a bit of a sacrament, as us as a species, and there will always be that demand. It's going to hurt. A lot of the places that we grew up in basically are going to disappear and are just going to live in memories and photos. This happened before. It's happened with vaudeville when the movies came out, and those vaudeville places are now rock and roll halls. So I have a feeling that some of these rock and roll halls are now going to disappear, but they will be back somehow.
Actually, that's a very astute vision on that. I always thought they would just disappear, but you're right. The vaudeville ones did sort of reinvent themselves. When the band gets together and starts making music, how important is commercial success to the band? You start back on Pure Rock Fury and Blast Tyrant, and you start getting on the charts, and you start getting this heat. But when you sit down to write a song, do you just write sort of the best clutch song possible, or do you think, okay, we need to throw in this and that to make it radio friendly?
No, is the short answer. I think we've made our music in the same manner since the very beginning. We'll cut a riff up, and kick it around, and I'll put lyrics to it. If anything, we have to shorten it because we have no problem sitting on a riff for 5 minutes, but that's not a song. You have to have ups and downs and dynamics in it. Sure, there have been plenty of times that we've edited our songs after the fact as a single to go to radio, but that's over too. Terrestrial radio and rock and roll are done. So it's kind of liberating in some regards that you're no longer saying that you have to get to the hook in the first 30 seconds. And I think, I'll give you an example. There was a radio station, internet radio station in the UK that we offered a song to called Willie Nelson, and they wanted us to edit it for radio. And we just decided, no, we're not going to do that. And wouldn't be able to say that 15 years ago.
No, you'd have to play the game. Okay, so you've said a couple of times that this is done and this is done. Where do you see us going from here? How do you sort of see your career moving forward, and how do you sort of plan for what's coming up?
Well, it's all conjecture at this point. I mean, I'm trying to look at the glass as being half full, and otherwise the only other option is despair, and I can't do that. Assuming things get back to normal or whatever the new normal is, I think that the appetite for live music and festivals is going to be off the charts. I think people are going to go bonkers to get out in the summer, in a field in summer, and listen to their favorite music with their friends. It may be a slow start with that, but I think maybe sometimes you have to have something taken away from you to appreciate it and not take it for granted. And maybe I certainly took plenty of things for granted. And, a band like us, we will do that because that's what we love doing. But we've also learned a lesson. It's sort of like, necessity is the mother of invention. And that's what we're doing right now with singing to a laptop.
Yeah, that seems to that doesn't seem to get you very excited to stand in front of the laptop, but I think it's what we're going to be doing for a little bit. Ticketmaster and Live Nation have said that they think shows will be held off until fall of 2021. When it does come back and the fans do return, where do you see ticket pricing going and things like meet and greets? Is that something that's also in the past where it might be nice to spend $300 to meet Clutch or to meet Kiss or to meet whoever, but now you're just going to be like, yeah, okay, we're done. Where do you see sort of the business model going?
Well, we're probably the wrong band to ask that because we never did our own meet and greets. We always found it really uncomfortable charging people to meet us. We'd rather do it naturally. We had sometimes, a venue or a festival would say, that's part of the deal. You have to meet, and that's fine. I have a feeling that's gone away too. The whole idea of shaking hands day after day after day with strangers is probably not on anyone's to-do list in the near future. And ticket prices, that's hard to say. I mean, I think there's more value certainly in a live show. I think because there's more work that goes into it. It's not just the bands that survive off of that. It's the crew and the vendors and and a lot of other kind of like peripherals that go around a festival.
Right.
So I think there's that, but I think maybe, just speaking what we did yesterday, I see a lot of bands doing very kind of short concerts for a little bit of money. So maybe it's more like that. It's more of there's no, you don't have to drive. You don't have to get a designated driver. You don't have to park. So maybe the convenience of watching a band play for half an hour for a couple of bucks in your house will be appealing to people. I know, but I do think, again, the demand for live music will never go away.
I fully agree, and I've been watching sort of the talking heads say that ticket prices will go up, and I just don't see how you can charge fans that have been unemployed for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and are going to try to get their mortgages back in order, exorbitant prices. But that's just me.
Well, I think there's a lot of it has to do with that's the only way bands are making money now. They're not making it on album sales, and so it's merch and ticket sales, physical tickets. And I've seen bands do kind of smaller capacity rooms, with, maybe a kind of boutique or longer intimate set for a lot more money. And we talked about that. And I think that's, it's kind of odd for us because our fans, they're working class people, and a lot of them have not been working, and who God knows when they'll start working again. So to come around and do that, I think wouldn't necessarily be in anyone's interest, theirs or ours. So where the ticket price ultimately ends up, that's above my pay grade, really.
Yeah, it is. Well, not that it is, but I do think that we're going to see an adjustment. The Obelisk, or Obelix, as we say in French, is coming out on Record Store Day in June. Talk to me about the box set, but also the importance of an event like Record Store Day. I think it's become very celebratory and very important to everyone involved that they have something for that day. Talk to me about those two things.
Well, of course it's great to support record stores because they're, again, few and far between, and they're almost always mom and pops. And it's a cool opportunity to do something, kind of off the wall, whether it be just a picture disc or a reissue, or you want to do something with an etching. You can get real creative, and people really have the appetite for that. So, this Record Store Day, I've heard rumors that they're going to do more than one. So the release date, I think, for the Obelisk, it may not be that day. It may be at a different one, but I could be wrong, because I think people don't know if these record stores are actually going to be open at that time. So we're just kind of waiting around to find out. So that's where we stand with that.
Yeah,
Yet another unknown.
Yeah, another unknown, and that's I think what the hard part. But I was reading that information straight from the recordstoreday.com, so hopefully.
Oh,
But
okay. Well, maybe you're right.
well, listen, I don't think there's anybody who's right these days because shows are being rebooked and and you just don't know. It's very strange.
We're booking shows that we haven't even done yet. We're booking them already now for summer of 2021. And it's a really strange phenomenon, but it's easier to reschedule than it is to cancel. No one wants to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, so talk to me about how you sort of plan the career out, because I see a lot of bands are delaying releases, and I would think, well, now you've got a captive audience that could probably sit at home and listen all day, but how does Clutch sort of see themselves moving forward in terms of planning? Because you can't plan necessarily a September tour, and do we know if 2021 is realistic? We sort of hope so. How does that affect the business in terms of just getting the ducks in order?
Yeah, it's hard. It's just a lot of unknowns. Unfortunately, I know a lot of bands that, just had an album come out or are about to have an album come out, and the rug is just completely pulled out from under them. We had pretty much tapped out on Book of Bad Decisions, and, we had already been talking about the next record when this started. But, we're like anyone else. The logistics can be difficult. Getting together, certainly getting into a proper studio is going to be problematic. We want to write a great record, but it's going to take a lot longer. For example, myself, most of my days are spent homeschooling and trying to relearn mixed fractions again. And it's hard to turn around and then go, okay, now let's write a song, So I've heard the analogy a lot used of building the airplane while it's already in mid-flight, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
It really is. And in terms of the algebra and stuff, at what point do you just turn to the kids and go, listen, I don't use this in my life, so don't worry about it?
We're getting close.
I have told that to my two kids. I go, listen, you're not going to need that. You're not going to be an engineer. Just stop it. Well, hey, listen, I can't do everything. Weathermaker Music is, of course, the record label that is owned by yourself and your manager. Talk to me about the decision to have that set up and be the owner and proprietor of your own music and not hand it over to Universal, not hand it over to Warner. Talk to me about the importance of that decision, and is it something that you recommend up-and-coming bands do, is start your own thing?
I'll say that it's the best business decision this band has ever made. It started when we had done, the major label dance for years and years, and then we signed a deal with supposed to be 50-50. They didn't pay us anything, so we went to court, and they couldn't pay us then, and so we got awarded back 3 masters, which was Blast Tyrant, Robot Hive, and Beale Street. And we asked ourselves at that point, do we want to just give this away again? And we said no. So we started Weathermaker. It was a lot of work. Business doesn't come naturally to me. John Paul is definitely more of the businessman of the band. But, you cut out so many middle people, things happen so much more efficiently. And, if something goes wrong, we know who to blame and we can fix it. And I think fans appreciate the notion of buying, from the band instead of a middle person. And it's and I don't why any artist would think that signing to a major is something to brag about is beyond me. There's a stigma of putting out your own music as if it's sort of like, oh, no one will take us in. I meet people, I'll say, oh, we put out our own record label, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, what? And then turn around and then brag about them signing a 7-album contract. That mentality from, the 70s, 80s, and 90s is still ingrained in a lot of people's heads. Young bands now are so in tune with things like YouTube. Why would they want to get some kind of patron in a massive company? It never works out. Especially these days, rock and roll is, as far as like the popularity contest, it's, you know, it's as good as it's ever been, but it doesn't sell music like it did in the, 70s and 80s. It's a taste change. So you got to find your audience, and it's a lot easier to do that if you do it on your own.
Now, they say with streaming, with Spotify and Apple Music and all that the labels are getting rich and the artists aren't getting rich. By having Weathermaker Music, has that sort of leveled the playing field for you, where as people spin it on Spotify, you are seeing a return? Or is there still this disconnect between what those streaming services are doing and a band?
Well, from what I understand, the reason those labels are actually getting wealthy off of Spotify is not because of royalties. It's because they own Spotify. They're the investors in Spotify. So if you're an investor in Spotify, sure, you're making bank. But the actual, I remember, I forget, maybe it was Pete Townsend was talking about his check for a Who, like the Who's quarterly payment, and it was like $80 or something. I mean, the formula that they use is laughable at best. I kind of look at it as like, okay, we got to play this game too. It's a bit like free advertising. So the algorithm decides that this person likes this, so they might like that, and sure, it can be convenient for your daily playlist, but to actually as a revenue making machine from the artist's perspective, it's a joke.
It is. Listen, I had this conversation with Desmond Child, and I think he said that Living on a Prayer has been downloaded like 6 billion times with a B, and he got a check for like under $4,000, and it's like, what now?
Yeah, yeah, I believe it.
What now? For how much? Anyway, the other thing I just really quickly want to touch on is the lineup. The band has been the band for its history. Many bands, of course, move parts in, whether you're talking about Iron Maiden or you're talking about Kiss, or people come in. What has sort of kept this band together? And if one of the guys comes to you and says, listen, I'm older, my back hurts, I want to be with the kids, I need to stay home, do you move on, or is clutch, period, end of story? We're not starting to do we're not a Lego,
Well, hopefully, we're a band whose sum is greater than its parts. There have been bands that have replaced members and done just as good, if not better. And there are some that you replace one thing, it's like Jenga, the whole tower comes down. There's a certain synchronicity that happens between people, and I think we have that to a degree. If someone said that, if it were, he just couldn't do it for whatever reason, I think we would just cross that bridge when we get to it. I do know this, I don't have any other marketable skill than what I do. So I would do my best to keep going, but at the same time, I would understand that was an irreplaceable moment in Clutch, that whatever changed it drastically, and it would never be the same.
So you're not building bar stools if Tim leaves or something.
Well, I'll do whatever it takes, but
right.
There's something, there's an expression, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. I think that's complete BS, because if you do something that you love, you work your ass off at it and try to protect it. And that's one thing we've become, very defensive about this over the years. Early on, I took it for granted. I was young. I took most of everything for granted. Now it's like a very precious thing that we try to constantly circle the wagons from anything that could, change that. Sometimes fate deals a bad hand, and that's just, we can't do anything about that, but we can do our best to lower the odds.
And I'll finish on this. You mentioned that you don't have any other marketable skills, of course, jokingly, but what is sort of the importance for the band to keep making new music? Because at some point after all these years, going back to whatever, 91 or 92, you have a catalog of music. You could just show up at a venue in Montreal and say, Clutch is here tonight, and you'd get the same amount of fans. How important is it to actually stay creative and stay moving the ball forward on the field and not just say, all right, here, we're getting 10 greatest hits, leave us alone?
I think the creative, if someone has the creative impulse, then they have to do it. It's sort of like, a shark has to keep swimming or it drowns. I've had my happiest moments when I had that eureka moment about lyrics or a guitar riff, and also those moments of less inspired times where I was pulling my hair out. And I don't think that'll ever change. I think the joy of creating something out of nothing is once you get a taste of that, you want to keep doing it over and over again. And if you're sure, being able to play an instrument is great, but there's a moment where if you're just playing the instrument, then the artistry isn't there anymore. It's just become more of a technical proficiency thing, and you got to have both.
Yeah, I agree. And as much as I love when bands do like the album tours, sometimes I see it a bit lazy. You could just go, hey, it's the Blast Tyrant tour. It's like, yeah, okay, but come on, Anyway.
Yeah, we do that. We'll do it now. We've only done it 2 or 3 times,
right.
But the idea of doing it for a tour just is not appetizing.
Yeah, and that's what I've always appreciated about Clutch. To me, it's a band that's always moved forward. I don't see the band as somebody that sits back and go, wow, in 1998 we did Elephant Riders. If we could just do that again. And that's what I appreciate about your band. So on that, Neil, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And I'm glad we finally got the interview done.
After 4 years of missed calls and missed opportunities, the best one, of course, and I'll finish on this, was Heavy Montreal. As you recall, they had the Artist World on one part of this island and the media tent in another city, it was ridiculous. And they sent all the media to the media tent, and they left the band in the Artist World, which was literally, half a kilometer apart, or and it was just like, anyway, nobody.
I remember getting taken around in a golf cart, and I was like, where are we going? We've been in the golf cart for 20 minutes already.
Through
it
the
was
dust.
Beautiful. I think it all worked out, but logistically it was a nightmare.
It was. The festival, when you're on the stage playing, it's great. But that Artist World media tent situation was just a little bit on the funky side. But it's okay. Listen, it's all rock and roll, and everybody enjoyed it. And all I want is that it happens again. So let's hope.
It will.
Thank you, sir. Merci.
All right, thank you.
Cheers. Yep. Bye-bye.
Ever wonder what Vince Neil would sound like if he was a black belt in Taekwondo? What about what his favorite McDonald's menu item is? Just hold the pickles. This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.